Let me try that one more time. Call us into session again before our 3 o'clock meeting. Welcome everyone here. Madam Clerk, all the commissioners here along with the county manager and finance officer. And if you would, please check your telephones and other recording devices that you may have. Put those on silent for us. And as you come up, be sure you turn the speaker on so Kay can get us recorded. Gentlemen, you've had the agenda for a day or two now. We'll now accept the motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Got a motion by Commissioner Britton. All in favor, signify by raising the right hand. Madam Clerk, that'll be 5-0. Moving on to item number 3 is items for decision from Burke Development, Inc. regarding Jackson Corrugated Paper regarding an agreement that will be presented by Alan Wood, President of BDI, and the CEO. So, Alan, if you will come forward and tell us about this additional agreement for Jackson.
Okay, this agreement was necessary because it's the first one I think we've done. There's a lease situation. So the owner of the building, American Roller Bearing, did not want to have a deed of trust. For our security purposes, they set up a side agreement which states that the funds will not be paid out on this building reuse to the company until the jobs are created, held for 6 months, and the grant's ready to be closed out. So to back up and just give a little bit of background on this, Jackson Corrugated was approved for a building reuse grant. The creation of 42 jobs was tied to that. And so all that is done. And what this does is it would defray any payment out until all the terms of the grant had already been satisfied. So, and that's what the side agreement does, and therefore we would not require the deed of trust, and we could check that block off of the agreement between the state and American Roller Bearing.
All right, questions for Alan?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one, and I'm not sure I just understood what you said. Alan, you said that the deed of trust is no longer necessary on this new deal.
On this particular one, because any money would be defrayed until all of the terms of the grant had been approved.
Okay.
So that means the company creates the jobs that are stipulated, which is 42. They're verified, and then we verify that they're held for 6 months, which that means we can close the grant out at the same time the money is sent to them.
So I guess that's the reason I have the question on your second whereas from the bottom. It's on page 2. It says once the grant funds are released, it doesn't say closed, but once they're released, the corporation will be simultaneously released from any obligation under the grant agreement, which means he doesn't have to maintain 42 employees or none of the other stuff. In other words, it just becomes void.
But the way these are always set up is that you have 18 months to create the jobs, and then you track them for 6 months beyond the time that they're created. We don't track these in perpetuity. I mean, they create the jobs, we verify they're created, we verify that they hold them for 6 months. And then at that point in time, we don't track these any longer.
But yeah, he would not have to maintain the 42 employees.
We have no way of I mean, this is not something that we can track forever.
Okay, thank you. That answered my question, sir.
Any other questions or comments? It's a pleasure of the board on this matter.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the side agreement between American Roller Bearing and Jackson Corrugated in Burke County as presented.
All right, you've heard Vice Chairman Mulvey's motion. All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. All opposed, 5-0, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Alan, so much.
Thank you.
Well, moving on to number 4, our items for discussion. Our first item is from the Finance Department with the Volunteer Fire Department request for a tax rate change. That'll be presented by Margaret Pierce. our Deputy County Manager, Finance Director, along with West End Fire Department residents, Chief Randall Brackett is here. Chief, if you want to come on up, one of you or both of you to the table. Hey, JR. Margaret, are you going to start first?
Yes, sir. The West End Fire Department did request a 1 cent tax increase with the budget proposal. You have in your packet their budget request and minutes from their board meeting where they discussed it.
Comments, Chief? Chief, comments?
Yes, first of all, the Chairman Carswell, members of the board, County Manager, I appreciate the opportunity to come and present our request for a budget increase. Just FYI, West End Fire Department is the largest fire department in the county. We have 3 fire stations. We run from Patty's Creek, State Park, all the way down to Jamestown Road and Interstate 40 and out to Brackett Brothers Lumber Company on, Gold Mine Road. We have 3 fire stations. We have a duty officer on duty all the time, 7 days a week, 24 hours. And I would say this, that we have the most conservative board that you could possibly have. They require that we use due diligence and make sure that everything that we request and they approve is necessary and appropriate. When we presented this year's budget, we told them that we had a budget that recommended no increase in taxes, and we had a budget that recommended a 1 cent increase. We shared with the board that there was going to be a reval, and that reval, I think countywide, was like 7% increase in value, and at West End it was actually 11%. So we were a little bit above the county average. If you look at our budget, we have $305,000 budgeted this year for expenses, and our actual expenses are like $324,000, $395,000. So we were over our budget. We used our fund balance money to pay for those expenses. The primary reason or the primary request for this increase is to do some maintenance at our facilities. Our parking lots are in horrible condition. Anytime you have an unattended or a station that there's not somebody there all the time, it's a golden opportunity for large trucks, buses, and those kind of things to turn around in the parking lots, and that's really hard on the asphalt. We've delayed doing anything on our parking lots for several years now, and it's got to the point where we feel like it's only cost effective for us to do that now at this time. In addition to that, we had, and that was about $34,000 of money that we budgeted in this budget, additional money that we hadn't budgeted before. And we've got some fire apparatus equipment that is running out of date. There's a date on it that after that time, after 15 years, you can't use it, you have to replace it. So we've got about $16,000 in there to replace air packs. We have an additional $12,000 to repair some trucks, some of our fire apparatus that's more than 25 years old. And then we have anticipated insurance increase of about $5,000. Based on that, based on our recommendation to the board that we have a 1 cent increase, and they approved that, and we're requesting that tonight.
Thank you, Randall. Questions for Chief Brackett at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I do. Mr. Brackett, one quick question.
Amen. Yes,
We're
sir.
holding a public hearing today because we spend tax dollars.
Yes, sir.
And I have several times suggested that fire departments should do that. Is it in your bylaws that y'all have a public hearing before you bring that?
It is not, sir. We have an annual meeting where we invite everybody in the community. We publish it in the paper, and everybody in the community is invited to come and participate in that process. The process would be the nomination and election of board members. And that's the time when the community would have the opportunity to have input. Other than that, we don't do anything else. We don't do anything publicly requesting people to come.
But you do have a fire department meeting with the board every month, right?
Yes, sir,
Okay.
we do.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Other questions or comments for Chief Brackett? All right. So we are to provide direction to our staff on Randall's request. Does anybody have a suggestion or?
Leave the request as submitted.
All right. Kay, do you want that in the form of a motion? This recommendation for staff on Randall's request, do you want motions or just recommendations?
Pleasure of the board, sir.
Pleasure of the board is to suggest to the county manager that he consider the 1 cent increase for West End Fire Department.
So we would modify and place that into the actual budget for adoption at the appropriate time.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. That's it, Chief. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate, one comment, if you'd let me,
Yes, sir.
you know, I've got the stage here, I might as well take advantage of it. I would say this to the commissioners and to anybody else that listens, I say it all the time, there's a pending crisis in North Carolina and in the country when it comes to volunteer fire service. It's getting harder and harder and harder to get volunteers to come out and participate in volunteer fire departments. The state regulations, the federal regulations, all of those regulations, plus the time that's required to participate and be a part of it. It's becoming harder and harder. We've got several departments. We're fortunate, West End's fortunate right now. We have a full roster of people, but we have several departments in the county that are not at full roster, and they're having a real hard time trying to get people. Just put everybody on notice that, in my opinion, in the next decade, that it's going to be a county function to do fire service. It won't be volunteer fire service anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Randall. All right, moving on into item number 2 is from Finance for the fiscal year 1920, proposed fee changes presented by Margaret Pierce. Margaret?
Yes, sir. Commissioners, you have in your packet requested fee changes from different departments, and we have representatives here to answer specific questions you may have on the changes as requested. Within planning, community development, and building inspections, these requests were proposed increases to better suit the expenditures of these processes. Environmental Health and Health Department, these have been reviewed by their board, and it matches the cost of these different processes and medications as needed, plus a markup to assist the county for other overhead. The water and sewer rates are to try to address increasing costs of water and sewer production and solid waste as well. Would you like for the departments to answer any specific questions for you?
Let me see if the commissioners have questions or comments at this time. Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple. Some of the increases are a little bit shocking, to say the least. You've got one on there that's a 50% increase. You've got a couple that's going up $50. I'm not going to call them out. You can look at them. Temporary power and rough end, $0 to $250. And to me, that's just absurd, Mr. Chairman, that these fees are applied. And Wayne and I were on board when we began the Burke County Water Project, having county water, and we've gone up bit by bit to that is more than double than what we started with. So it just keeps taking the citizens' money for some of these items. And I just think a couple of them are just way too high or too big of an increase, and probably, in my view, need to be revisited a little bit to see if they can bring those down. Thank you.
Department head available to reply to that? Which one in particular was the first one? It's water. Which one you want to address first, so we can keep in order right here?
The one that went up 50, I wasn't going to call them out, Mr. Chairman, but minor shoreline production permit went from 100 to 150. The temporary power and rough in, which I guess is planning and zoning, went from nothing to $250.
Scott?
So temporary power at Ruffin is building inspections, and I'm going to let Shane answer that because he worked with building inspections on the fee schedule. But essentially, all the surrounding counties have this fee, and this is the fee that they have, and we've been doing this at our time and expense and not charging for this. And I'll let Shane
Thank you,
add some
Mr. Chairman
details.
and members of the board. And that is correct. This was a request directly from the building inspectors. We've begun to have requests for temporary power at Ruffin that does require an extra inspection and follow-up inspections from the building inspectors. So they said that this is something that we had lacking because we didn't have, well, it's allowed through the building code. We didn't have a process and a fee for everything for that. So they worked on that. We called surrounding counties to make sure that our fee is consistent with them. This was in the middle. So this is what we would like to go with to be consistent with surrounding counties and North Carolina State Building Code. And to cover the time and the costs and everything for following up for our department's expenses.
So I guess the next question, Scott, and it's a funny one.
All right.
If we needed to be doing it, why haven't we done it before, and why the huge, amount of money all at once? And I'm assuming, and I know this is not important to you. Well, it is important to you. You just build a house, you'll understand that. When a guy's struggling to get it started and build his own house and have, keep coming up with more expenses, just, even though he already owns the land and et cetera, it can be a hardship on a lot of our citizens.
It can be, sir, but the truth is we're supposed to try to recover as much as we can on fees when we're doing something for a specific individual that benefits that individual. And so they have been doing this. Our building inspections department is one of the finest in the state, and you'll find every developer will agree with that comment because we bend over backwards and we do hundreds of thousands of dollars that we aren't compensated for to help out that field. So if I can guarantee you, if our building inspectors say this is necessary, it's necessary because they don't, they're not frivolous in what they come forward with. And I'd have to have Steve give you more details on this, our chief building inspector, if you need more detail about how this works.
Mr. Chairman, one more if I may.
You go right ahead.
Very quickly, you just said that you'd have to get more detail, but any idea how many of those permits we issue a year and what kind of revenue that produces for the county?
I don't know because we haven't been issuing them.
Okay.
And we just now came up with the procedure. Do you know how many?
We have issued quite a few since people have started requesting that of us. It wasn't something that was commonly requested, and there are concerns about it. The house is not finished at that point, making sure that they're not overloading electricity or people are living in it. So there is a fair amount of follow-up that goes along with that, but it is allowed by state building code. So it's a practice that we're trying to accommodate the developers and the builders within the county to allow them to have that temporary power, which does provide them a level of convenience for running an extension cord and makes it easier for them, but it does require the extra work and the safety inspection from our building inspectors, which it is a fee, but it is a phenomenal service because we have three incredibly smart, knowledgeable, experienced building inspectors who go out and are constantly on their phones and driving around the county, making sure that things are done right, done safely, and done well. So they're really, this is a very cheap way for citizens in the county to really protect their investment of their home, which can be the biggest investment that somebody makes in their life.
So is there a wild guess, 100, 500, 1,000 a year?
I would say right now, maybe we've done. Yeah.
Will, when we put it into place, it'll probably be over 100. So.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, at this time, we are to consider providing direction to staff on the proposed fee changes. Any comments from commissioners or suggestions?
Mr. Chairman, I so move.
All right. Brian, you have your direction there to go ahead and propose those changes, okay? All right, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a nice afternoon.
Moving again to item number 3 is human resources. It's the year 3 classification and pay study, and that will be presented by Rhonda Lee, our human resources director. Rhonda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I have a handout that I'm going to hand to each of you, and then we'll go over this. So,
Bless you. Thank you.
well, I'm pleased to be here because we are wrapping up. No, I'm fine. I've got one. Thank you. We're wrapping up a 3-year project that we've had going on, and we just really appreciate the commissioners allowing us to do this. So I think you have the agenda item before you, and the handout that I just gave you were the recommendations on pay grades, shifting from one to, there's the current pay grade and the proposed pay grade. So just to kind of give you an overview again, the purpose of the classification and study review is to analyze the occupational classifications to determine if the salary grade assignment in the pay plan is appropriate based on a labor market analysis. These again are for the surrounding counties. Nothing changed from prior years. Our comparison, what we were trying to do was to be 100% of market average for our starting rate of pay for these jobs. And if we weren't, the recommendation was to move them up a pay grade, 2 pay grades, or 3 pay grades, whichever was deemed appropriate for that. The positions that were studied in year 3 were the 911 telecommunications and 911 management operation occupations, community development, which includes planning, inspection, code enforcement occupations, finance and accounting support occupations, and those would also be in DSS and health departments, senior center and veteran services occupations, libraries, elections occupations, and I do need to clarify that the elections director was not studied in this process. In the beginning, that position was excluded, as well as the county manager, the county commissioners, the Board of Elections, and also I want to get the title right on this one, from BDI, the BDI Director of Business Retention and Expansion. Those were not part of this overall pay study. So I just want to be sure everybody understands that. We also studied the tax office occupations, soil and water, parks and rec, and the department heads. And you already have seen the estimated cost of this is about $423,000. There's no impact to what I'm bringing to you today because that's already been included into this year's budget. If you would like, I can go over each of these that I just handed. Johnny said no, he doesn't want me to read these to him. So, but just for clarification, if the current pay grade was an 18 and the recommended is a 21, that's shifting up 15%. So for each pay grade, it's 5% increase, okay? And that also increases the pay rate of the people that are in those positions. And I guess if there are any questions, I'll be glad to try to answer any of those.
All right, questions or comments to Rhonda?
Mr. Chairman, Rhonda, that study alone is gonna cost $423,000.
Yes, sir.
Who is that by?
Approximately. Now, that's not, not the study, the actual financial impact to the county when these increases are
The
implemented.
effect of the pay raises
Yes,
that you
yes.
anticipate.
Yes, we did have an outside consultant that did take care of this for us this year, and the cost of that was $6,500, which is a bargain in relation to
I didn't get the price.
$6,500, which is a
$6,500.
bargain
I feel
when you're
better
having.
already.
Yeah, it didn't cost $423,000 for that person to do it. If not, we're all in the wrong business. We should be doing that.
All right, that answered my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions for Rhonda?
Rhonda, and you may help me remember, why did we exclude the elections director?
The reason why that's excluded, Commissioner Britton, is because the general statute of how to set the pay for an election director really is specific. That is recommended from the Board of Elections to the county commissioners for consideration. And that outside influence is why we took that off the pay grade. Probably, I think we took that off in July of 2014. It's not been part of the actual pay plan since July of 14 because of the outside influence to the pay grade, if that makes sense.
So have we, what method could we use to take their request and determine whether or not we feel it's reasonable, or is that something you could review, or?
We certainly could. The last time that they came forward and asked for an increase was in 2014 for their director. Since then, there's not been any additional request, but that's the process in which it happens. They bring forward that, and there's a big, long statute that tells how to compare. You've got to compare with similarly situated counties. That would be with the registered voters, the size of the county, and then what you're doing is comparing those salaries to the salaries of those counties to make sure you're in I guess, in the running with those.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah, and we can do that, but again, we haven't had that recommendation or request from the Board of Elections for that.
Mr. Chairman, I think it was a few years ago, there was some request, and we did some analysis and actually did a change, but at the same time, we removed her from the county's pay plan along with Hope, because Hope is at BDI, and there's some differences there. And I don't remember if there was one other position that we had taken out of the pay plan.
Well, the county manager position has always been off. Also, the county commissioners have also always been off of the pay plan, as well as the Board of Elections has always been off. You are correct, Brian. It was Hope Hopkins and it was Debbie Mace that came off, and that was July of 2014 that we did take those off. But it is something that we could review if that board brings that forward.
Yeah, and for equity purposes, I asked Rhonda to make sure that you were aware of that, because I think it does merit some review to treat her fairly. I know members of her department are seeing some changes.
Yes, they are.
And that may be something the board wants our HR director to look into so that we, again, treat her fairly in that position. She's been here for a number of years now, so it's whatever the board would like to do.
You mentioned you were happy to be here wrapping this up. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman and others, it's been our desire to not stop this process, but to begin it again and keep it moving forward with, back to year one, so that we don't get into a lapse as we did in the past.
Sure. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't saying I don't want to do this anymore. It was just, it's nice to have the 3-year that we got through it. So, yeah.
Okay. Whether or not it would be appropriate to ask Rhonda to touch base with the Board of Elections to see if that's something they want you to do or them to do, or do we just?
I think it would be good for HR to reach out to that board. They may not be aware, because right now, I'd hate for them to think that there wasn't an option, and they not, and this employee not receive an appropriate increase. Just keeping everything above board and everybody informed, and see if they want to make a recommendation for consideration.
Yeah. I'll be glad to
Rhonda,
reach
you're
out.
so directed to do that one,
Okay,
if you will.
yeah, be glad to.
Other questions for Rhonda? Rhonda, I have one.
Sure.
Fire Marshal, EM Director, Merchant Management Director, 29 to a 30. Does our Fire Marshal, EM Director have other duties that other counties don't do? Mainly, and I ask that because we do an excessive amount, not an excessive, we do a large amount of training here in the county that Mike is in charge of to make sure everything is prepared to get done. And I know that's not in the scope of a lot of Fire Marshal, EM Directors, combination both. Is that a fair statement?
I did ask the consultant to dig into that a little bit more deeper as part of this process. And, this was his recommendation, but I can certainly go back and ask him to relook at that one more time to make sure.
If you asked him to look at it, did
To
he?
compare.
Oh, he just did a comparison?
Yeah.
Did he find anything different that he mentioned to you?
Not really, not really. I think we have an outstanding fire marshal and EM director, and he goes above and beyond. But keep in mind, this is, again, just strictly kind of the pay plan study, not necessarily a merit or performance type thing, which Mike is awesome. I mean, we all know that. But it is something that we could revisit. We could revisit that.
Do most counties have Fire Marshal, EM Director combination positions?
Some do, some don't. And that's a really good question, because if we didn't have enough data with the surrounding counties, we would try to reach out to counties that were similar in size to get a good sampling of other similar positions to his. And so that's what we did when we reviewed that again with them. But we'll be glad again to dig into it a bit more deeply.
Gentlemen, without objection, I'm going to ask Rhonda to take another look at that one position. That gentleman has been really good for Burke County, and he's brought us in money, a lot of money he has brought in with the programs that he does. And I just want to make sure that he's being treated fairly also. So, again, without objection, and I hear none, please revisit that one,
I
okay?
will, thank you, yes.
Any others, gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, I want to make one comment because of a couple of hints, and it wasn't what you just said, so don't you feel guilty, but just as a word of wise, that as a good board, taking care of both sides of the fence, employees and the taxpayers, from my own perspective, I think it's good ruling. We're not looking ways to create and find how to spend money. We're looking ways to be fair and honest to all the employees. And going back to what Ron said, that's the reason you need to approach everybody, that each department, that they get the fair treatment and see where they lie in their job. If we're going to do the research, let's do it 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? All right. Without objection, Brian, let's move forward with this, with Rhonda's, the things that you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
Is that
Board of
correct?
Elections and.
Okay,
Yeah,
election.
yeah.
Yes, sir. I said without objection. Is that okay? All right, okay. Thank you, sir. All right, thank you so much, Rhonda.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, moving on to item number 4 for the fiscal year 1920 budget, explanation of change and items of note, presented by Margaret Pierce, Deputy County Manager and Finance Director. Margaret?
You have notes in your packets, gentlemen. I hope you had an opportunity to review those, and please stop me if you have any questions. I'm going to go through these, not word for word, so if there's something I skip over, feel free to slow me down and ask another question if you have it. The aids and donations increased $14,651. We did not include any new agencies for funding, but there was an increase for Burke Recovery, the History Museum, REACT, and Reason included in these numbers.
Gentlemen, do we want to take these one at a time or just go for, I'd really like for you to ask questions on each one if you would, if you have any questions. So the first one was aids and donations. Any questions or comments? All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I looked at these. I did have one concern in relation to the History Museum. I think they had requested $30,000. I think the budget, if my memory's correct, appropriated $5,000. Is that right, Margaret? You may have-
Last year and $10,000 this year, so it was a $5,000 increase.
Okay, 5 to 10 this year. They had requested, was it 30,000?
36.7.
36.7. I was hoping that we might consider a little bit more than that. I just really feel like they're, kind of the holder of our county's history, and they're doing a wonderful job. Maybe if we could do a little bit more than the 5. I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but
Mr. Chairman, may I comment?
Yes, sir.
Jeff was not on the board when we donated that. And Wayne, if you recall our commitment, they committed they'd never come to us to ask for money to run that. And here they are. And it's one thing for this county to give a free enterprise or a nonprofit organization 1.25, wasn't that what we said? You weren't here either, excuse me. But that property was valued at 1.2 million, and they insured us. And I went along with the 5,000 last year. But as long as you continue to ante up, guess what they're going to do? They're going to ask you to ante up, excuse me. I will say one other thing. As long as we donate money, and you could even see this in some of the fire departments, I know all of you will remember these. They don't have any fundraising events. So, and I feel like that is one source that after giving them that, they should be able to run that. They have no payments, well, I don't know if they have any payments, excuse me, I take that back. They did not have to go in debt for the building, and the property that it's on. So I just wanted everybody to know the real basis and terms that property exchanged hands to the History Museum.
Mr. Manager, I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but and maybe you can, Maynard. Was that building actually transferred to them, or was it actually given to them to use so long as they wish, but it really doesn't belong to them? It would come back to the county if they chose to vacate.
It was given to them, no strings attached, except if they chose to discontinue and no longer need it, it was to come back to the county.
Now, are we talking about the actual museum or the property and building that we turned over to them a couple of years ago?
Both.
Okay, because I think they both had the same, Mr. Chair,
Right, both of them were what are called defeasible fees. It's a gift in fee simple, but it's subject to being taken away if certain conditions are ever violated, and of course, those conditions would be the operation of a history museum on the property. So we would get the property back if the history museum ever ceases using that property for a museum.
now, was that the original, the city, I think, gave them the one building, didn't they?
No, the city traded that to the county in exchange for the long-term lease on the old courthouse. And then the county gave it.
That was
Yeah,
back
you know,
in-
some of you that are more versed in counties across the state, I haven't studied history museums, but I wonder if most counties or many counties, the history museum is not part of the county operation. As part, a department, you know, it falls under a department of the county. Is that true? Falls,
I know in Stanley County, it was a actual county department and a county building.
It was not in Watauga. And I don't believe it was in Lincoln. I'm not familiar with any that are, but I'm sure it can be. I've seen it be a part of the Tourism Development Authority, depending. The one in Watauga is actually part of the college. Appalachian runs it.
I'm not proposing that we get into the business, but I'm proposing it would be nice if we could give them enough to stay out of the business. Might be, you know, if we feel that concerned about the history of our county. Anyway,
Is there a particular number that we're,
I was thinking maybe an additional $5,000.
And just, Mr. Chairman, just one comment, they do a fantastic job, and I don't mind even with an increase, but before we do that, I would like to know, because I know they get donations, and some sizable donations. I'd like to know what the number is they've got in the foundation as far as monies set aside, because I would think it'd be somewhat sizable. We've never asked that question, but I would like to know, there's a foundation there, how much is in that foundation, and then go from there before I agree to, maybe I'm wrong and they don't have those monies, but if they do, that would be more pertinent to probably what we're talking about, because we are doubling it now. Like I said, and I don't mind going to 15, but I would like to find out that question before I commit to that.
Any other questions or comments? Margaret, I'm going to agree with Scott on that. Please get with them and see if they do have, and it may be called a fund balance or
Fund balance or
whatever it is.
foundation, something like
See if they've got any additional funds that we are not familiar with before we make a commitment on anything. Would you please?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I add something to that? I'd like to know what they did last year to raise funds, what's on board this year to raise funds, what are they doing to help themselves?
Well, they have a membership that they send out every year, Maynard, and it's at various amounts of different money. So they do that every year. I know they do that.
Well, things change, and we're aware of that. I am aware of several churches whose, some of their senior citizens passed away, and a big portion of their donation is affected. But I still say that it's looking to me to take from my fellow neighbors to support some of these things is just asking and going too far. That's not water, that's not food. That's not something you have to live. And I enjoy the History Museum, and I like it, I support it and spirit and what it's supposed to do. But I want them to live up to their end of the bargain. If you're gonna take this building, and I'm gonna give it to you debt-free, and you're gonna run it without coming to me, don't come to me. That's the bottom line.
Okay, I think we can shut that one down, and you got your direction on that?
Yes, sir. And
Okay.
the only other thing on aids and donations is I believe Carolina Land and Lakes has requested a reconsideration, and they will be here on the meeting on June the 4th.
Okay. All right, moving on to Animal Services.
Animal Services is a department area we created to identify the building functions and new employees focus on adoption. The animal control expenditures are still within the sheriff's budget. So I want you to understand this is new, is why it's a little different looking, in an effort to sort of split the cost between the two, for what's identifiable directly to animals and the building, on this.
Mr. Chairman, this falls in the same line to me, if I may speak. If we're going to discontinue 2 from the sheriff's department and pick those up, that should be switching employees and not adding employees. And, I know that Animal Services has gained a big spotlight, but it falls under that same category. It ain't food. It's not medicine. It's extracurricular activities from the taxpayer standpoint, and we should limit taxing my neighbors and your neighbors' dollars for that to be successful. It should be income producing and pay its own way. And most of the volunteer animal services do just that. They charge, they pay their own way, and they're not using tax dollars to do it.
Your comments are duly noted. Anyone else? Okay, moving on to building inspections.
Building inspections has an increase of $18,270. This department is within the pay plan cycle this year, and that along with the health insurance and retirement increase. And probably should have made a note of that earlier. Retirement increase was projected to increase 0.25% over a period of 5 years. This was to be the 3rd year of that, and in February, I believe that board voted to change it to 1.2% increase on all of us. So we had a significant retirement expense increase across the board within all departments. Health insurance is up 5% overall for the amount we set aside to cover expenditures, as well as the salary pay plan in a department like this. Otherwise, their expenditure requests were consistent with prior spending and needs. Are there questions on this one?
Questions on schools?
Building inspection.
Excuse me, building inspections? All right, moving on to Burke County Schools.
Burke County Schools requested an increase of $174,750 to add 2 additional school nurse positions. For them, it actually adds 1 position because they are funding 1 this year through their own fund balance. This would move the cost over to the county. And in speaking with them and even with Rebecca McLeod with the health department, the number of nurses is needed for the number of students. It definitely fills a need and assists the health department in seeing less clients and perhaps keeping down wellness visits throughout the hospitals and different areas of our county.
Questions on schools?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. This continues to get questions. I asked the question a couple months ago from one of the school officers, And I don't know, Brian, I guess it's your question more than anybody else. The state was releasing millions of dollars. They were gonna cover resource officers and some nurses, and I understand they're not through with it yet in adding. But the information I gave you was entirely for this purpose. How many of you read the information? They continue to ask. I have told Hugh and Warren Daniel both, if school is a state entity, let the state run it and quit mandating stuff that we end up paying for. I think it's a fair request. I think it's a fair stand. We have money coming from every direction just about going to your schools. And I have been on that chain of volunteers, giving money for paper, giving money for pencil, giving money for napkins. And the paper I gave you the other day, do you recall how much each teacher gets for each classroom? $1,500 a year, provided by the state. So we need to do a little bit more research and decide where that money is going before we ante up any money for the schools, especially if the state is considering providing those positions. That's all I say for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Any other comments?
I just do want to make one quick comment. Our friends at the Burke County Schools, they've done a great job, and I think it's a very reasonable request. They know this is a tough budget year because we're addressing a lot of different issues, from starting a new animal control division to sheriff pay increases to the 3% COLA to various other things that we're doing, the new jail coming online. So they worked with us, and I just want to express my appreciation to them. I think it's, like I said, a very reasonable request. Thank you.
Other comments? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to communications.
Communications has a increase of $277,287. This is for equipment replacement that goes throughout the center. A portion of this is paid for through 911 funds, but unfortunately those funds, it isn't eligible for all of it, but you have to go ahead and provide the equipment in order to keep our center functioning at the best.
Equipment due to age and or new equipment.
Aging out, end of life on the telephone system, the console system they use to send the calls back out. It's multiple pieces, 5 different major pieces of that equipment that is aged out. We are still evaluating with the 911 board, requesting them to reconsider and see if there's any chance they will pay for any more of it. But historically, that has not, that board does not tend to bend. But we are certainly asking those questions still, hoping that we won't have to expend all of these dollars.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming a list of those are in your full budget. I haven't looked at that yet.
It's on that list of summary information that you sent out, I believe, last week.
In the book?
Yeah.
I can look it up later. Thank you.
That may have been a separate section that I need to get out. Yeah, I don't know
It's
that.
the phone system replacement, a server, an EZNet switch over, CAD software upgrade, and license renewal, and a universal power system battery replacement. Mr. Taylor, I believe Brian emailed you. I believe Brian emailed you that list of
Okay.
large items.
Then I'll have it.
I'll go back and double check and just make sure I did send that, because I know we got busy there. But we'll get it out to you by tomorrow at the latest if I missed it.
I haven't erased anything on budget, so if you emailed it, I got it.
That was equipment that Brock came in February and went over with the board at the pre-budget meeting on the,
I
on what
didn't
it
have
all
a
was.
question about it, so I was just,
Okay. Moving on to community development.
Within community development, there is an error in the numbers, and I apologize. Scott Carpenter caught that I had made a mistake on the salary, which affects the benefits section. We will be revising the numbers for you within the final budget. The Shane's salary is split over 3 departments, and I captured it within 2. I doubled a piece up, and I apologize for that. Within splitting him. So you will see a reduction in this department of $10,865 under the recommendation.
Okay. Questions on community development? All right, move on to cooperative extension.
Cooperative extension has an increase of $8,205. The furniture she requested to complete the changeover within her building that she's been doing progressively is in here and recommended. We were not able to include the small bus. However, we found a department with a 15-passenger van that they really weren't utilizing to its full potential. So we spoke to Spring. I've spoken to her about that this might be a viable option for this year to give her a second 15-passenger van, and she will be able to increase the number of people on her trips, and then we can revisit the bus when we don't have quite, hopefully, such a tight budget year next year. She felt like that might help them out. So,
Questions on cooperative extension?
Mr. Chairman, just so that everybody's aware of the furniture that they're buying over there is made by, is it prison?
I believe it is correctional institution. Yeah.
Extraordinary nice, and just so everybody be aware that's available as a source. Thank you.
County manager's office.
Has an increase of $3,005, and that is pretty much tied to the retirement and health insurance.
Courts.
They are the same amount as current year, and I did talk with them about these numbers. They were able, on some of their furniture requests, Ms. Kay had a wonderful source that provided some very nice furniture for everyone recently to multiple departments, and they were able to fill some of their requests.
What was the price tag on the furniture that Kay got?
It was 0, other than renting a truck to move it. So we appreciate very much Kay. It was a retiring firm that reached out to her based on some articles in the newspaper, and we got some very nice pieces from them. And bookshelves went to the court system, a couple desks, I believe, and some file cabinets that they needed. So
We conservatively estimate that we got about $30,000 worth of free quality
Oh, yeah.
pieces. And we're
good
very-
wood furniture, very nice file cabinets with
very
locks.
appreciative.
Thank you for saving us $30,000, Kay. So much. Moving on to debt service.
Debt service, you have listed there by loan, the debt service, principal and interest for each. That does have an overall decrease of $387,621 in the current year, just due to reductions in planned amounts.
Okay. Questions on debt service? DSS.
DSS has an increase of $527,000. 41 new positions were requested. Brian and I worked closely with Doreen and her leadership team and recommended 14 positions. This should hopefully address some of the Medicaid backlog issues, particularly if Medicaid expansion goes through, and also looking toward Child Protective Services, providing positions there as well to try to ensure safety as much as possible of our children. They requested, oh, sorry.
before you move, were you able to read the article that came out from Raleigh today about the new positions the General Assembly was?
The one I found was on
didn't-
Medicaid expansion. I wasn't able to find another one.
Okay,
If you've got
that
that,
was
I would,
IDD,
IDE,
I
okay.
want to think IDD, okay. Let's stay on top of that, see, I will do my due diligence every day, reading everything I can from the association and then calling to Raleigh to see what they're going to do as far as positions on this. If they're going to give us anything, which I doubt they will. But there was some scuttle about when the budget comes from the Senate this week, there may be some changes in it, so we'll just have to wait and see. Okay. And then 5 new vehicles.
5 new vehicles, 4 HRVs, and then 1 10-passenger van, because the 15 they have is bigger than they have used, been able to utilize fully, and they brought the request to us to see if someone else could use it. So we appreciate them reaching out and letting us know they had a resource that they really could use something different. So they had requested 6 vehicles, and we were able to do this van and the 4 replacements, but not the additional. So that's going to be a nice opportunity to help other departments as well. We are also just continuing to evaluate, Johnny, what we can do, because spacing is a challenge, and seeing what we can identify there to assist them in progressing.
Mr. Chairman, if I might make a comment on that, I thought we just did mostly that's not for salaries, right, Brian? Is that just for desk, computers, et cetera, for DSS?
Well, you've got the positions and the costs related to retirement and insurance. So I'm not sure that, I would assume is also going to include any kind of cost for computers. I think some of what we are going to be looking at is opportunities to either privatize some activities that are in DSS, and also some things where people can work from home if they meet certain productivity levels, and if they don't, then they will not be allowed to do that. So that's more of a carrot, and DSS is fairly comfortable with the things that could be done. That helps us with the room in the buildings, if we're able to do that, at least try it for a year, because some of the issues we've run into is they can't paint the offices because there's nowhere for anybody to move around to. And again, if we don't have to provide space and heat, that's a savings to the county. And if we can get increased productivity, that's a double bonus for the county taxpayer.
Well, my concern, if each one of us wanted a cook and a house cleaner, and we want to bill it to the county, well, that's what they're doing. They're getting employees and building it to the county. And I understand the state's desire for the DSS to come to the county. But when you're going to pay the bills for the state, that's totally a different aspect. And I'm sorry, they could tell you they wanted 100. But if they're not going to pay them, I wouldn't hire them. I just wouldn't hire them.
It's an interesting relationship we have in that they issue dictates and the possibility of unpleasantries if we don't achieve their dictates. But there is a percentage of reimbursement that we get, and different positions get different reimbursement rates. So there would be some revenue attached to helping to fund this increased cost. Now, I can't get to the specifics of different positions, but I don't know if, Margaret, you want to do that, Mr. Chairman, if you've got time.
Well, the chairman would say, we unfortunately had to sign a memorandum of understanding with the state saying that we would do what was necessary to help DSS. We were forced to sign, as you recall, forced to sign that MOU. Don't know what the state would, I don't know whether they come put the whole county in jail if we don't follow up on our MOU, but I don't want to have to be the one to to answer to that, and I don't want Brian to have to answer to that, even though we had to sign our names saying that we would follow the MOU. We're between a rock and a hard place, and every year we come up and we say the same thing. If the state would, well, the state's not. I mean, that's the bottom line, because that's the way the world is running right now. The state's not gonna do it. So I don't say that jokingly. I say we are really between a rock and a hard place. It's mandates, mandates, mandates.
Well, the things that we don't think about that continue to cost us and cost you for years upon years upon years is that when they're your employee, you end up with paying insurance, you end up paying part of the taxes, you pay retirement, and when you add that up, it becomes a mountain, and it's not a trifling amount of money. And since we're charged with being stewards of the county, it's high time that we take a couple of these departments and be a good steward with it for the county, not for the employees. That's not truly our responsibility, and we should not be having the burden of paying for it.
Just one quick comment, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, we're all frustrated over it, but you were talking about reimbursement, and I don't know on these exact positions, but it seems like, depending on the position, we get anywhere from 50 to 75%, like on reimbursement.
That's a good general rule of thumb.
That's
Medicaid positions that are directly taking applications and working with the clients. If it's a Medicaid supervisor, it's 50%, but if it's the regular intake workers and processors, the income case maintenance workers, those are generally at 75%, yes.
Okay.
Other positions, 50. It can be different depending on what program they're coded to. It's very, very specific to the minute of the day what they're doing. They have to do day sheets that they track all their minutes.
Sure.
And that goes in to determine, but as a general rule, that's absolutely correct.
So when the question was asked earlier, just for clarity, part of that 527 increase is we're paying a portion of that
We
salary.
did receive revenue, we will
But you're
receive revenue
considering
back.
what you're getting back is part of that number.
That's the expense side.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a revenue side to it as well.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, Margaret, what's the total package for employees for DSS? 10 million? Isn't it 10 million now, a little more?
I'd have to add that up.
Don't bother.
Okay.
The scenario will carry the same. 25% of 10 million is 2.5 million. That this county is paying out of their kitty, which is ridiculous. Totally ridiculous. I'd take that bargain anywhere. 25% on the money, wouldn't you? Thank you.
Well, Commissioner Taylor, looking back, the proposed of the 41 positions, the salaries full-time was going to be right at $8 million. With the 14, it's going to be about 6.8.
You're not counting the ones that's there. You're counting just the addition.
No, this is salaries full-time. Yes, that's all of them. That's the,
Over 100.
yeah.
All right.
Moving on to economic development.
Economic development has a decrease, which is really related to the fact that Zero Delta had their building reuse and another loan of almost $600,000 in 18-19 that is done. They'll finish that out this year. So that it just is it was mostly paid through, it was a grant, $500,000 grant for them. So the decrease actually has an accompanying loss of revenue. So on that one, occupancy tax is projected up. It has continued to climb. And Mr. Phillips with the TDA will tell you with the new hotel coming on, they're really anticipating a very strong growth in the coming year.
That's a decrease.
It is a decrease, but occupancy tax is part of that and it's up.
Margaret, is BDI in this category?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to mention here, in the BDI budget, looking through it specifically, they had requested, or Alan did, support for a housing development position. I believe if I read everything right, Brian, you didn't recommend that in your proposed budget.
I believe we went with the lower budget request, and this is a difficult year for us, with everything else we've got going on, but that's just a recommendation, y'all. Want to change it?
Yeah, I looked at that. I think if I ran the numbers correctly, it would mean about $41,275 to the county. Each entity in the group was asked to, do their part of that. I really believe with our housing situation, with the amount of new industry that we're bringing to the county with the School of Science and Math, we need a concerted effort to promote housing and housing development. So I would like for us to consider adding that position back for BDI.
Mr. Chairman, I'm in agreement. We all talk about the housing shortage, but this is an opportunity for us to actually be proactive and try to solve this issue. And I think the first step is getting somebody that's dedicated to look at this on a daily basis, because I know Alan at BDI, he's so busy bringing in new business, he doesn't have time to try to find a concerted effort to try to solve this problem. So I'm going to agree with Jeff. I was looking at those numbers, and I was looking at roughly 40,000 and some change. And so I would say, when you look at the importance of that position, and it is in economic development, we definitely need it.
This was not to be a permanent position. This would be, I think Alan was basing his numbers on a 2-year arrangement.
Yes, and I'm thinking back more about it now. I had questions about monies that have been left over from past budget years where you had things that weren't fully expended, and if that money could be used ahead of new money from the county. And I'm not sure how their financial records are. I know some of those are grants that are tied to direct activities, and that would be irrelevant to anything along these lines, but that when Margaret and I were struggling with all that's in this budget, I was trying to be a little conservative in some places where it's not discounting the importance of anything. It's just we've got a lot of large chunks to deal with in this budget this year. Thank you.
And
Mr. Chairman, Alan is here yet. Alan, I thought you in your presentation said you could fund that out of your present term, budget at one time? Thank you.
Brian, I just want to make one comment, and I appreciate you trying to be as conservative as you can. I sent all of you a report from the state demographer that came to the Western Piedmont Council of Governments last week and made a presentation about what our population increases are going to be. And it was made very apparent at that COG meeting that we are going to have a housing shortage. Hickory is looking at trying to probably put somebody on their staff also to go in and start trying to see how they're going to face their housing shortage. Caldwell County is kind of doing the same thing. So I'm going to agree with my colleagues on this one just for a part-time position, but I want to make sure that every part of BDI puts that money in the pot, not just the county. I spoke with a city council person yesterday who said she is confident that Morganton is going to put their money in. So I want to make sure, since it is only going to be a 2-year position, and I think it was recommended and spelled out what this person would do. So based on what I heard from that meeting that I had with the COG and some other meetings that we've had across the state about housing shortages, I'm inclined to agree that Allen doesn't have the time, and I am confident we can hire a person that we need to make sure that the COG has already identified 12 possible places to buy properties for construction folks to come in and start building homes. Our permits are up They've gone up for the last 3 months, thank God. People are building family dwellings again, so we're going to have to find some places to put some people.
I think, Johnny, we got to address too the fact that we have 2,000 to 3,000 vacant housing units in Burke County. How do we address that number? They're just sitting there, nothing's happening to them.
That's part of the process, I think, for the new person. That came out in the Realtor's report. I hope you got a copy of that. It was a very, very thick report. If you didn't, Alan, make sure that people get a copy of that. It just came out, and that was addressed of the vacant houses. We've got to make sure that those houses have somebody in them. They're there, they're ready to go. Some of them need fixing up, obviously, but we've got to find some people to come in and refurbish.
Most of them are small bungalows that are too small for the average family.
That's a great thing that you said that, because I think some of these people that's coming in for the school of science and math, some of these professors, they're bungalow type people, you know, and hopefully we can get those in those. That's cool. I'm glad you said that. Okay. All right. Any other questions on economic development? Moving on to elections.
Elections Department had an increase of $88,342. This is predominantly because in the current budget, they had one election cycle and they have two in the coming cycle. And each of those is approximately a little over $70,000.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, just one. We don't know yet if we get to use the election machines one more year, or will this include new equipment?
No. It's, this is on the presumption that we'll be allowed to continue with the elections equipment we have now for another 2 years. I think it's 2 years, isn't it?
That's what's proposed.
Yeah. If things change and Raleigh says otherwise, then we will just have to deal with it.
All 21 counties that are using DREs are in the same boat that we're in, and they're floating right along with us. House Bill 502 is still in committee, and I can't recall the number of the other bill. It's still in committee. They're not dead. They're still in committee. I talked to Hugh yesterday. I think 502 is the one that we're on, is a local bill. I think that's the one that'll move through first, and that'll help us tremendously if that bill moves out.
Along with that comment, I believe it was in Town and Country, I read that some people are calling some of our people at Raleigh, kind of a hypocrite would be a nice word, but they haven't decided themselves yet which one's going to work and which one won't. So they're ahead of the, I guess they got the cart before the horse, but it's obviously they're not together yet, and how should they expect the counties to follow suit? It's ridiculous.
Mr. Chairman, I can also tell you that Debbie met with her board and did let me know that they understood the budget as recommended and were comfortable with it at this time.
Fantastic. All right. Moving on to EMS.
EMS has an increase of $271,688. They did request a part-time position for administrative work that is not included. 2 vehicles are in there, an ambulance, and it will also have the bariatric attachments that they need for replacement, as well as a QRV for one of the supervisors. 6 radios and 2 ZOL monitors are recommended. A significant portion of this increase is because in 18-19, they received 8 new positions, full-time positions, for that new station that were only funded for part of the year. This fulfills the full year's funding for that, plus the 8.5% increase from last year, applying it across the board. That was a significant number within the pay plan in 18-19. So.
Mr. Chairman, I noticed in there, there was, I believe, about $36,000 of equipment that was not funded. Do you happen to know what that amounted to, what that was, kind of equipment? My concern being, sitting on that committee, I think we've had a lot of claims in relation to workers' comp, moving people around and that kind of thing. If it's equipment
You're talking about is it Stryker?
The Stryker stretchers?
Yeah, those, I mean, you're looking at like So is it $600,000 to do all the ambulances?
10 was gonna be a little over $100,000. Is that the line you're referring to, the medical equipment line?
No, the line I saw was $36,000. The equipment line, it was zero. I don't see, you don't see that?
Are you in fire marshal emergency services? That has a 36,000 that's not funded. In the emergency medical services, really the main piece of equipment that was not funded was those Stryker power load stretchers. We just didn't, each ambulance we're doing will have one, but we didn't feel this was the year we could go back and retrofit 10 additional.
So that looks like, Margaret, it's second from the bottom, Jeff, under emergency medical services. I do see a 188 requested to 76 proposed.
On page 23, Jeff, or are you on page 25?
I think I was on page 25. Yeah, Fire Marshal Emergency Services.
That is an all-terrain vehicle, off-road utility vehicle to assist them, be an additional one to what they have currently. And we spoke to Mike Willis about that, and he felt like it was something, it is a need, but he understood if we waited and tried to address it next year.
Okay, thank you.
And any questions on emergency medical services?
All right, moving on to finance. Oh, excuse me, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
I didn't know if the request for medical equipment was 188 and it was recommended at 76,000, is that correct? And that mostly is the retrofitting of the
That's those stretchers.
those stretchers, and part of our thoughts is that as we order new ambulances, that'll be included in the new ambulance. And if we're able to get some breathing room in the next budget year, that maybe we can start doing a chunk of the newer ambulances and eventually phase it completely through.
Brian, just for information purposes, remind me generally the life of an ambulance. Well, how long are we getting? Because I know we can.
Catch on fire.
Yeah.
The board has been very good. We have, for the past, I don't know, 6 to 7 years, have replaced at least one ambulance, and there was a year or two that we actually did 2. And in trying to make our money go as far as we can, there are some ambulances that you can take the box off when it retires and put it on a new chassis and save yourself about 30% or more of the cost. But when you go to the Chevrolet ambulances that were purchased some years ago, they were notorious, just like there were some Fords that were notorious with problems, and the Chevrolets are now trying to phase those out, and you're not able to remount those boxes. So a new ambulance is about $220.
220 this year is because it also has a specialized system for bariatric larger patients to pull them in. The power stretcher isn't exactly, you have to actually have a separate winch as well.
So the new ambulances have winches.
This one does. The rest of them have the power system. This one, it will be our bariatric. We have 2 ambulances that service those clients in need of additional weight requirements.
This is getting in the 600 pounds and above category in a lot of places, and it's real. I mean, I wasn't really aware of that, but it is, we have customers that need that size of a stretcher.
So Scott, that adds about $10,000. So normally 205, 210 is closer to the range for a replacement. This one is a little bit more just because of that additional feature that's needed this time.
Okay.
And to answer your question about how long, I think we're seeing about 12 years.
That's good for that much wear and tear.
Mr. Chairman, I want to ask one question, if I may. Brian, at what point can we ever expect them to be self-paying if it costs $2 million to run the service, will it generate $2 million?
I doubt it, because some of your customers have no insurance, no financial means, and we're required to go if we get the call.
Medicaid rates are a big challenge in that as well, because you have that portion that he's talking about, but probably 50% of our patients fall under Medicaid, a lot of times who are our client, are older citizens who need an ambulance, and they cap out their rates below the cost of the service.
All right, let's move on to finance.
Finance has a decrease of $18,000 approximately. This is really tied to the fact that we overlapped salaries this year to assist in transition in the office.
Questions on the decrease? Move on to fire marshal.
Fire marshal saw a decrease of $229,982. This is really due to that large storage building that was funded in 1819. He did request that utility vehicle that we were not able to include. He is, it's 5 radios as a communication equipment, which he felt like was a higher priority to him to assist in getting coverage in the places they need it within the county for him. There's also a plan rewrite every 5 years. The emergency plan has to be rewritten, and this will include some work from a consultant and printing costs because it has to be published in a specific way for the state offices.
All right, questions? All right, move on to the garage.
Garage sees a small decrease of $3,000. They had an IT replacement in the current year, and they won't in the next year.
Moving on to general services.
General services, the main portion of, not looking at buildings, has a decrease of $78,679. That's due to, they had a new building, a new storage building, a vehicle, slag and salt equipment that were in the current budget that are not in the coming budget. We were not able to fund their request for a new complex location, the $350,000. And the $37,000 vehicle, Miles felt like he could wait another year on it when we talked with him on that one.
Questions on general services or comments? Brian?
The dump truck is not a funding for a new dump truck. It is for a partially used truck we think we can get by with and meet the needs without having to sink that large a capital cost. Is that?
That's in solid waste.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I got you somewhere else.
That's okay. I'm confused too.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions on general services? All right, general services building.
Within the buildings, you see a decrease of $1.3 million. The biggest piece of that's going to be your Sally Porter, the $1.2 million, where that's funded in 1819 and then, of course, not. Now that project will carry forward. You'll see that, of course, the whole thing won't be expended this year, and we'll just shift that funding into next year once we know the amounts at the fiscal year end. There's a couple other large projects. Tax office and deeds had some renovations in 1819 for security and safety, and the ag building has insulation. So with those not in next year's budget, that's where that decrease comes from. We are recommending the Burke Services Building HVAC replacement and funds to assist in repairing leaks within the building, particularly where it meets, the two buildings meet. The courthouse will have upgraded door controls and some work on carpet, plumbing and painting in jury rooms and a couple other rooms upstairs for them.
All right, questions on general services or the buildings?
Is that 1.2 coming out of general fund, or is that being borrowed? How are we paying for the?
The Sallyport project was requested out of fund balance this year. A couple of months ago, we approved moving forward with that. So it's a one-time, and that should pretty well wrap up security improvements and issues for the sheriff and moving, I don't know if you call them inmates or detainees, since they're not adjudicated, but removing people who are coming to trial from the jail up to the courtroom, instead of taking them up through a stairwell where they can meet the public and other parties, it really is not good for security.
So if you add that cost to the new jail, you're at 23.2?
I'd have to see what the numbers are settling out until we finish the project and see if there's anything left over. You're just given a general cost estimate.
Does anybody need to take a break right quick? Anybody? Or you want to move on? Go move on, Wayne says. All right. What's next? Governing Board.
Increase of $6,500. This department employee was in the pay study this year, and that increase is related to salary benefits.
That was that insurance thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Health Department?
They had an increase of $6,550. They did request a vehicle that's recommended for environmental health.
Questions? Human Resources?
Increase of, it's 29,203. I think a typo was identified there. I know y'all think I can't type, but I swear to God I can. That department was within the pay cycle increase, and that is probably the biggest piece of that as well, when you start.
3% raise increase? Excuse me. You're talking about the 3% across the board rate increase?
I'm talking about the pay plan cycle that Rhonda just went over. That department is in there. They had some increases due to that.
How many employees we have in Human Resources now?
Four.
Four.
Five. Excuse me, five. Yeah, five.
I'll ask you another question about that later. Thank you.
Okay.
IT?
Information technology has a significant increase of $265,959. This is tied to the project that Steve talked to you about in February, where the data center is going to be, it's out of date, out of life, so they have to redo it, servers and switches. That cost is $389,000, give or take. So some of the equipment they did this year, we're using that money to fund that project. So these are necessary to keep us up to date and safe.
Questions?
Mr. Chairman, I would only say that perhaps there's some equipment in there that could wait another year if we need to find a place for some funds. I know we've spent lots of money in the last 4 or 5 years on IT, and surely, you know, some of this stuff that's manufacturer says is end of life could wait another year if you need to find something. Just my
Brian,
opinion.
if you take that under consideration, you and Margaret, see what's in there that may wait another year if we have to, okay? Without objection. All right, land records?
Have an increase of $668. This is insurance and retirement increases pretty much.
Okay, legal?
Legal services is budgeted with a increase of $25,000. This is tied to historical spending, and then also just we feel with the coming opioid lawsuits, we know that's going to ramp up some, and we felt like this might be needed for that project.
All right, questions on legal?
Mr. Chairman, just a quick question. JR, you indicated there's some movement on the suit that we're in. Will it be done by the year, you think?
I don't think it would be done. I don't think it would be done prior to this coming year end.
All right.
They are looking at just starting trial unless something really out of the ordinary happens to convince drug distributors to fold their tents and run. It'll probably be a couple of years from now.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the library.
Library has a decrease of $810,000. The department is in the pay plan cycle, so they'll see increases in salary benefits, but we have an overall decrease due to the Valdez expansion being budgeted in the 18-19 year. I believe it's on target to be completed still around October, and everything seems to be going really well out there.
Fantastic. Any questions about the library? All right, move on to mental health.
Mental health is the same as current year. That's what they requested, and we appreciated them not asking for an increase.
Me too. Non-departmental.
Non-departmental has an increase of $427,000. The COLA recommendation is budgeted here until we know from the commissioners if we should divide that out completely to departments. We also have the increase for insurance here. Costs just continue to go up. Unfortunately, insurance is not something we can do without.
Questions on non-departmental?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one that faded note, somebody hired to check background checks for new jail positions. Why wouldn't that fall under the sheriff's department instead of non-governmental?
What was it? I'm sorry.
It's a position to do background checks for new people at the jail. It's under non-governmental instead of the jail.
Okay.
We have a part-time person who does that with the 911 center, and in order to not charge them for it, we just positioned it here to better facilitate it not overcharging either department. It will be split between the departments, the cost of the person that's currently doing that for 911 center. That was the recommendation of the sheriff, was they have a person who does the DCI background checks and documentation and things, and that if he could utilize them, that would assist with it.
Mr. Taylor, some of this is, we already have somebody that we have doing that work for 911. We put some additional funds there so that they could be taking up the jailers if needed. Also, the sheriff, I think, in his original budget made the request for $75,000 and was going to use a former detective from the sheriff's department who's retired. And I brought it to the sheriff's attention that that person may get in a great deal of trouble with the IRS as well as the retirement system, because if you earn more than half of what you were making when you were working full-time, they think you need to be contributing to the retirement system. And I think there's a very strict test for who is or what qualifies as a private contractor with the IRS. So by putting some money aside like this and using somebody that already does background checks for us, we can accomplish what's being asked of us, as well as the sheriff can do some of these himself with his own CID staff, we believe.
Well, I guess the only other question, I understand your information, but doesn't the sheriff already have somebody in place to do background checks?
The sheriff doesn't think the staff he has the time to do this many in a short period of time. If we start hiring up for the new jail early fall, of course, I'm sure this will shock you. I did not recommend the number of positions that he has requested for the jail, and he's going to come talk to you about that very soon. But again, I'm trying to find a way to make our money go as far as I can and be as effective as we can. By doing this through an existing part-time employee, I think we can get to where we need to be. Sheriff may have some different views, and of course he is elected, and I'm sure he'll share those views with you.
It just seemed out of order, and I guess if you're not going to put another sheriff, it's where it ought to be. Thank you.
There's a decrease of $56,000. It's due to a pass-through grant for JCPC that is normally awarded in July or August for additional funding. I actually think it's gotten awarded earlier this year and will be coming to your June 4th pre-agenda meeting for inclusion on the consent agenda. The state was ahead of the game on that one, but we didn't include it because at the time we prepared this, we weren't aware it was going to get awarded. So it is revenue expense, so it will be a wash.
Questions? All right, recreation.
has an increase of $57,000. Capital requests, they had included a mower, playground equipment at REAP, the trail at Parker Road, and a grant match for the Watermill Access Road area, and then trail maintenance funds for Fontaflora. Those were included. They had two other requests for capital this year, field lights at REAP and a bathroom renovation at Parker Road that we were not able to include.
Questions on recreation?
Margaret, one quick question. Can you give me clarity on their Fauna-Flora Trails M&R building and grounds? It says 15,000 requested and 5,000 recommended.
That's for trail maintenance, and in further talking with them and with Scott and Shane, the hope is that we can make some things stretch a little bit farther maybe than the first request.
So they do believe they can make it work because we're putting all this energy and money into that trail. I just want to make sure we maintain it. So if they're fine with it, that was just a general question.
That was the impression we got from them, was that they understood that 5,000 would give them some money to buy gravel, and then they have staff that can go out and take care of many things. Where initially I think they were thinking maybe contract some of it, but their Parks and Rec has ground staff that can assist.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one quick question. Scott, you may know the answer, but they've been for 10 years or more trying to get those two other ballparks finished at REAP. And he claims he can have them rented, leased out just about every weekend of the I don't know if it's the year or the season, but they were designed to have 4 competitive ballparks in operation at once.
Yeah, some of that is predicated on having sufficient hotel rooms. We are doing something to increase that, and then if another project occurs down at the 105 exit in the next little while, then they would have hotel capacity to accommodate people coming to those games. So that's some of why we said, well, then let's wait until we get a little closer to having enough hotel space for it.
What was the dollar amount for the bathroom at Parker Road? Anybody remember?
I think it was 40,000.
40,000.
40,000, okay.
Second line from the bottom.
Okay. Moving on to registered deeds.
Registered deeds will see an increase of $57,000. This is really tied to the capital request she brought to you in February, and those are funded from her set-aside dollars, other than the drive-through window. That drive-through window is actually requested within the buildings. We were not able to include that recommendation. I think there's still several unknowns with the city and the actual logistics of that space there that we were going to continue to evaluate down the road going forward. But her increase is tied to an increase in revenue.
Okay. Questions on registered deeds? Comments? All right, senior services.
Senior services will see an increase of a little over $32,000. The Morganton Center includes funds to address the drainage issues that she brought to our attention that are specifically directly in front of the opening and are causing some issues. So we hope that we can take care of that. And then with part of that, you would want to replace the carpet, and then the walls will have to be repainted to cover the water damage up and correct everything there. Exterior painting, she had requested, is not included at this time, and the other two centers should be relatively level.
Questions on senior services? All right, Sheriff.
Sheriff's Department has an increase of $720,000. Quite a bit of this would be tied to the 12% salary increase, funding it for the full year. As you may recall, the full estimate, I believe Rhonda brought you, was a little over $500,000 for a year on that. This also, there were 4 deputies requested, 4 new positions that were not recommended. Major requests included is the painting and wallpaper removal he asked for, furniture replacement, interview room equipment, which will match up, give him a better process of recording and better video quality on that. 20 MDTs, 16 Viper radios, and 11 of the 13 vehicles he requested are recommended in here. The significant items that were not recommended are the 24/7 outside legal service, the 2 radar systems, 2 trucks for narcotics officers are the 2 vehicles not recommended, a Colio system for security items for the officers, and body cameras for all officers. We did mention to him and talked with him about that the Colio system and those 2 trucks could be funded from the task force dollars if he so chooses. Any questions on that?
You say task force dollars, those are drug dollars that were seized back during the drug task force?
Yes, they are still in the process of being transferred. We're waiting on a report that hasn't been completed for last year. They are working with the federal government to finish that report so we can finalize that transfer.
Will that be significant dollars?
Just over $200,000. And what we need the report for is determine how much of that would be federal dollars that they received from them, how much might be state dollars, or how much might be local dollars.
But that would cover these other
It would
2
certainly cover
vehicles.
these things, and we also, within the detention budget, the jail budget recommended, they had requested a full body cavity scanning machine, and that was something else that we felt they could fund from those dollars if they really felt it was a need at the new jail.
Did you speak with the sheriff as to what his priority was? Would he rather have painted walls and furniture or systems?
I don't believe we asked him that specific question, no, sir.
If that money became available.
He has requested reconsideration and will be at your June 4th meeting to review his concerns with you.
Questions about the sheriff? Not the sheriff himself, but this request? Made myself clear there.
He's about to, Mr. Chairman, just to comment, he's
Yes, sir.
about to advance past the schools, the local budget, and probably will the next year.
I would not disagree with that, sir. Any other comments or questions about the sheriff? All right, let's move on to Sheriff Jail.
The jail budget will increase by a little over $1.3 million in the coming year. This department was not in the pay cycle study normally, but as we discussed in the spring, due to market conditions, a 10% increase for detention officers is included in this number. 43 positions were requested, 25 are included. Also, in various meetings with Catawba County, it was determined to budget for Catawba for 6 months. And then hopefully the plan is that it will close down, which will take another month or 2 really. The inmates should be out, but you're still going to have things you have to take care of and do. So funding for Burt Catawba does include paying out vacations for all those officers, because even if they transfer to us, it's a new entity and we have to close all that out. So those dollars are reduced, but they're just basically transferred to funding officers for our new facility. There are multiple operating increases with the utilities, the medical, the food, uniforms, training. All of these were done, carefully considered, and all the information that we could find utilized to assist in making the best decisions possible on those numbers. Main requests that were not included, there was a large transport bus included in this, a new transport van, radios, and a fingerprint machine. We did not include the $75,000 request for contracted background services for the new staff and the full body scanner. And then, as I mentioned, we recommended that that was something certainly eligible that those funds could be used for. Questions on that budget?
I want to make sure that if he comes to us on June the 4th, please, Brian, both of you, ask him to write out specifically what he does not agree with, write out specifically what he thinks he needs in the dollar amount again, please. I want him to have that on paper ready for us. I don't want to have to go back and forth on that. As a matter of fact, if he could get that to us a day or two early before the meeting so we can take a look at it and be prepared with our questions for him, that would be really great. I'm assuming that there's a number of things he's not particularly satisfied with, correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Specifically, what he does not agree with amounts, and what else did you say?
What he proposes.
His proposal.
Yeah, his proposal, what he thinks, and a rationale for each one of those, if he could break it out that way.
And preferably prior to the meeting.
Yeah, preferably prior to the meeting. That'd give us a little bit of time to sit down and take a look at it, because I'm feeling that he's got a lot here he might want to change.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions at this time regarding the sheriff's jail? Okay, let's move on to the sheriff animal control.
Animal control shows a decrease of 22,000, and that's really just tied to the fact that some of those expenses are split now to that other budget. This is the cost directly related to the officers and the specific control areas of the function. And in our conversations, we understand this is not an area the sheriff is going to have you reconsider.
Okay. Thank goodness. Okay.
And there is a vehicle that was recommended in this budget. Any questions on animal control?
Yeah, I'd like a little better explanation. We're adding costs of employees for the county to take it over, and he's only reducing his cost 22,000, and he's losing 3 employees.
Sir, he's not losing any employees. The one employee that did administrative work.
He's repositioning them, and the county, we end up with more employees on his side. They're no longer budgeted under animal control.
You'll have the 3 deputies, or however many sworn deputies that are part of animal control, but you will have the one person he already had in the front office plus 2 additional to run the animal services department. So you're adding 2 non-sworn people to the animal shelter to help with adoptions and other things related to getting animals adopted instead of euthanized. So the animal services will actually have an increase of 2 people above what it is now. And the duties will be split. The enforcement and the pickup will still be done by the sheriff's deputies. The operation of the shelter and getting adoptions and the social media and all that involved will be handled and report directly to me.
So does he have
So-
two deputies that do field work?
Let's call those animal control officers. They can go do a deputy sheriff's work, but they are animal control officers, and their duty is to go pick up dogs.
Yeah.
So those animal control officers will still remain as animal control officers.
Yeah, and I know that I've seen 3 of them down there. I don't know if there was actually authorized 4, because he was telling me he was down 1, and a little while back, he was down to like only two officers, and he was talking about promoting the person in the front office to a job over at the sheriff's office, and I think records division. I said, I can't take that over, next week. But we're on the pathway to do that, and then I think as soon as that's accomplished, we might ask for about a week overlay so the new staff can work with the original front office person to understand the computer software used by animal services, and that before she's moved over to the sheriff's office.
Well, it makes all the sense in the world that you're still gonna have to have a sheriff deputy, if you will, who has authority and the legal aspects of the job to go out and pick up dogs, et cetera, et cetera. So I had already concluded that, one of them has to be a sheriff deputy. But will his pay come out of the animal shelter, or will it come out of the sheriff's department?
Sheriff's Department,
It will come from the sheriff's.
this budget right here, I believe it's 4 officers that are authorized.
Animal control officer.
Right, we did not change that. We did not that's the same number that's been there.
Well, I just, make sure we don't have duplication. You got one guy being paid by 2 entities for one job.
Oh, no, sir, the other budget is the 3 that will be at the shelter on a daily basis, functioning with the adoption and care of the animals. This budget is the control officers.
This is, what prevents the sheriff from using those officers to just do whatever?
Nothing.
That, as we've mentioned, going along here, I've kind of mentioned we should consider not, and I know there's some legal requirements for somebody maybe need to carry a badge and a gun and all that kind of thing, but I'm just not sure how this is going to work out. But with having, not having control over the folks who are picking up the animals, bring them to the shelter.
Well, okay, good thought. What do you imagine could happen, since you've thought about it?
Well, I was hopeful that the Animal Services Division would be all-inclusive, including the enforcement,
Okay,
similar to our code enforcement, I guess you might say.
okay.
That those guys answer to that department head, not to somebody else.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman, my ruthers for the whole situation is that it would be an entity in and to itself and operate itself with its own budget, with its own income. However, I do recognize that the average person coming to your house to collect a dog without a uniform on is not gonna have the respect and the clout, if you wanna use that word, to do the job.
It would be my guess, and only a guess, that the sheriff would not really go along with us to allow the animal control officers to be part of the Animal Services Center. I think he'd want to keep them under his control, as he said to me on a number of occasions. But we do have an enforcement officer, code enforcement, that sits over here, that does the same thing. So
He carries a gun in the
he carries a gun in the badge. JR, let's do a little checking and see what it would take. See if we can do it, number one. Then I'll talk to the sheriff and see if he'd be real amenable to letting those 2 animal control officers come under the Animal Services purview. We can do that. How about that?
So you're talking about keeping 2,
Yep, animal control officers, keep them in with Animal Services.
all 4 of them?
Yeah. See what he says about it, and see if we can do it, number one. Okay?
Okay.
All righty. Now let's move on to soil and water.
Soil and Water has an increase of just under 14,000, and it is predominantly tied to the pay plan changes and insurance and
That
retirement.
old raising the insurance thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Questions on soil and water? Tax, all areas?
Tax has an overall decrease of 16,819. Because of reval, you tend to reposition your expenses and your people. So one department might look like it has an increase, the other has a different decrease, but putting them together, it's a net decrease, and that's due to reval costs that are in current year that won't carry forward.
Questions on tax? Moving to transfers to other funds.
There's a decrease of $492,000. The current year has 2 large one-time transfers that won't be in the coming budget. One is the $225,000 to the Highway Roney Road project and the Highway 18 Roney Road project, and transfer to solid waste funds to assist with a large equipment purchase. This year, general fund is not assisting solid waste with their equipment purchase as they have for several years. They are able to do that on their own. Transportation, oh, sorry.
Questions on transfers?
Transportation's the same as current year for Greenway Transportation.
Yay. Veterans,
Increase of $1,190, and that's tied to that benefits.
okay.
Western Piedmont Community College is a decrease of $162,000. That's related just to capital. Their operation increase was approximately $80,000, which is recommended. Their capital in current year was $392,000, I believe, and they had requested $300,000. We worked with Sandy, and they found some funds within there that they'll have some small amounts left over in some things this year. And then with positioning the two buildings, they're trying to do it at the same time for cost savings. We're going to be able to, I think, function something to assist them by only recommending $150,000 for that capital. They are aware of that and comfortable that we can make this work.
Okay. Any questions? All right. WPCC? That's all.
That's the overall budget. The sales tax funds for the schools, you see an increase of a little over $1 million. That's with sales tax estimated increase at roughly 4%. And then you also have lottery, the every other year lottery pull down in there. 911 fund has a decrease of $193,000 at the time we published. We got a letter yesterday, the 28th, 2 days ago, from the 911 board decreasing our revenue for the coming year by approximately $8,630. So we will need to readjust the revenue and fund balance appropriations due to the decrease received from the 911 board.
Why'd they decrease us?
The funds we have spent over the last 2 years are less. We've rolled too much into fund balance. They only allow you to do 20% of a rolling average of da-da-da-da-da. It's a convoluted formula, but they had given us an estimated amount as they're required by statute to do in December, and then the final letter has to come by June 1st. And when it came, it was $8,600 less. We do have a fund balance there that we're going to be able to do the things that are needed that are 911 eligible. That list just seems to shrink each year, and we continue to appeal and work with them. Unfortunately, they have a very strong lobbyist and boards that tie that money up on how we can spend it.
Questions on 911? All right, capital project funds.
Capital projects is your Fontaflora trails predominantly. They had asked for $415,000 county dollars. 210 is recommended. They do have a $500,000, part of that's to match a $500,000 grant. So they'll be able to do $700,000 in projects there. Funds for the Crooks Access parking, the additional parking at the Fontaflora County Park are recommended, as well as the match for the RTP and the STBGDA grants that they have been awarded. They have some other grants out, but they have not been awarded, and part of their request was to go ahead and set aside those matches, but we preferred to wait until we determine if those grants will be awarded or not.
Okay. Jeff?
Refresh my memory, have we appropriated any funds for the Jonas Ridge Convenience Center already, or where do we stand with that?
For the site work on that project, we have funds in solid waste recommended budget to do the design schematics and planning for the new East Burke site and the Jonas Ridge site in Brian's recommendation.
I think there was some money appropriated for the actual purchase of the land, though, that we're doing this year.
Yes, that is appropriated, sorry. $49,000 to purchase the land and take care of closing costs.
We're not appropriating any funds for actual construction.
No, we are appropriating funds to do the planning of the site, and we'll follow the next year with the actual construction dollars.
Any other questions on capital projects? Okay, the water sewer fund.
Water sewer is an increase of 129,000. They did have the 4.5% rate increase that you said we could include. Thank you. That really is going to cover the fact that the operations and water repurchase costs have gone up significantly. I know that we are working with them on potentially renegotiating some of those contracts to try to see if we can contain any of those costs. We are waiting on the official award of the study, so the regional study, so that we can have that done to evaluate our processes and determine what our options are and what we need to do for the future.
To study on the grant.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. It would be part of that grant that we applied for. And we've received verbal confirmation that it's been awarded, but nothing in writing. So we're waiting
Okay.
to see the green of the dollars to be able to move forward with that. They had equipment for water tap installation, a new excavator that's included. They had requested reclassification that is not included in this.
Question on water sewer?
Mr. Chairman, I promised Miles I was gonna call him and get a better explanation on that Indian Trail, whatever.
Indian Wells?
Yeah, and I don't know, Wayne, what went wrong with that, but 10 years ago when we revamped and we were involved in getting right-of-ways, I went and got a couple right-of-ways to accomplish that, and it was gonna be done forever and ever and ever. And I'm at Jim, we ain't spending money every 3 to 5 years on that project. And I wanted to talk to him basically, and this, if this is not gonna fix it, we voted the other night to go ahead with that. But if it's not gonna fix it, we need to just, we need to throw that thing away, something. We've spent, I don't know, a couple $1 million to build it, $1 million to correct it. This latest fee is a grant on up there, well, it's close, it's 800,000, isn't it?
Are you talking about the Highway 18 Roney Road or Indian Hills?
Indian Hills.
Indian Hills.
Yeah, and we need to get with Miles in, because I'm not sure if there was some kind of a pump that needed to be replaced, and you have to
Yeah,
have a
he said it was.
backup, and there's some other things, and I don't want to speak out of turn and be confused.
25 years deal? Been there 25 years or something?
Well, no, we did that after we came on board,
100 years ago, wasn't it?
yeah, real close, but not quite. But the point is, we did that to make it a free flow. You didn't have to have a pump, and here we are buying a pump. I'd just like the explanation. Why are we spending that money when we spent all them millions to make a natural flow to Hickory?
We'll need to get him here, because I'm, of course, can't remember all the little nuances of that, but I think there's some parts of it that are natural flow, and there's other parts that you have to get it, the effluent up over a hill. But we'll just get Mr. Miles
We can
here.
request he come to the June 4th meeting, budget, we can request him come to
Well, I'm
the
not
June
sure
4th
it's,
budget
at
meeting.
this point, it's a budget meeting because we've already passed it, but I was just hoping somebody had a little more explanation on that, because it's a little embarrassing to have spent all that money, and again, being a good steward for the taxpayers, here we are for the third time spending money on a project that's supposed to have been completed. and
Okay,
done
put it on for a presentation. We had one presentation from one of Miles's predecessors that was telling us that it was free gravity here and a pump here. You remember we had a big old map. What was, I can't remember the guy's name. You remember that big presentation we had
Yes, I did.
for about an hour and a half about it was going to do this, and it didn't do what it said it was going to do. You're 100% correct.
Well, one thing they did, I do remember, is they allowed roadheads to add to that system. But that was their responsibility to get it up there. It shouldn't have created the problems that should cost us money, other than if somewhere the figures and the numbers were not done correctly, that it overloaded it and it couldn't handle the flow, but it was supposed to, because they put
Yeah.
a bigger system in.
We had to do a restriction on the pipe because there's a maximum daily flow and then there's a maximum peak flow. And we had to make sure that that was regulated. So I know that was done when Chris was here.
Chris?
Mr. Chairman, what meeting would you like that on?
Not anytime soon. Give him time to do, I want a whole report of every system that we got and how they connect with each other so that we'll know how the water flows. Thank you.
Downhill.
Yes. All right, any other questions? Okay, let's go to solid waste.
Solid waste overall has an increase of a little over $4,000. There is a rate increase that you said we could include in this. And for us, no general fund dollars have been transferred this year, which I think is significant. They will begin to stand on their own 2 feet, I feel like, with the rate increase. We do have to look to the future for their capital replacements. And equipment out there is significant, $400,000 bulldozer and the dump truck that Brian was mentioning earlier, a new one's $130,000. He did find that he could use a used one, and found one for, that we should be able to get somewhere in the $60,000 range that will do what he needs it to do with the gravel and moving other large items and not have to buy a brand new one for that process. Improvements other than building was the construction of a new container site at East Burke. But we felt like the dollars included here, the $20,000, is to do the design work, make sure it's permitted and ready, so that when we come to the next budget, hopefully we can include funds to build one or two, hopefully both of those, or potentially in some type of capital project scenario, look at building the 2 sites that are the next future sites we need to take care of on that.
Great.
Other capital requests were mower with the trailer, that dozer, a bush hog, and a truck diagnostic tool.
Questions on solid waste? All right, Margaret, if I'm correct, that concludes your
Unless you have any
explanations.
questions, that is it.
Yeah, I think you answered all the questions we went through there, and that was fantastic. Thank you so very much. It's very informative.
You're welcome.
Any other last remarks from Margaret? If not, we'll move into the county manager. Brian, closing remarks.
As you can see, there's a lot of big numbers here, and we were trying to get control of those and present them to you in a good manner, and also try to accomplish what we believe the board was interested in doing in the upcoming budget year, consistent with their longer desired plans for the county. I've already had some discussion with Margaret about looking and setting off a list of things that we want to have for the budget that follows this one, so that we are looking down the road a year or two. And as you know, the library here in Morganton is a potential project to be looked at. You've also got the potential of an animal shelter down the road in another couple of years. I'm not sure how quickly, but we are trying to make a sincere effort to look down the road, anticipate what the board may be interested in doing, and try to begin to prepare ourselves for that. As far as the budget, there is an appropriation of, was it $900,000 from fund balance for this budget. So again, you've got a number of things in this budget that are pretty significant dollars that won't be recurring, so that in the budget year after this, things begin to settle down some. So, where thought I could set things off for another year, that we tried to do that.
Thank you so much for those comments. Any other comments? If not, we'll stand in recess till June the 4th at 4:00 p.m.
Hello, I'm Brian Steen, the Burke County Manager, and I'd like to introduce you to Zeke, Ty, and Chloe. They're my 3 pets, and I adopted them all from rescue agencies. I hope if you're thinking about getting a dog or a cat, you'll consider contacting our local rescue agencies and adopt one. If you have a cat or a dog, I hope you'll also consider having them spay or neutered to help us reduce the number of unwanted pets in Burke County. Whatever you can do to help us would be appreciated, and in a moment we'll show you some contact information for both the rescue agencies in Burke County and agencies that can help you with low-cost spay and neuter. Thank you again. I hope you have a great day. Wolf.